married.
Okay. So that takes me out of the running, I guess. So there you go.
Named Jack.
And that's it. Perfect. That's perfect. That's basically the whole summary.
Do you wanna?
What area?
Yeah, I can do that.
Like surgery, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So this is John Agzarian. Did I say that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And he'll be talking about Ancestry.com.
Yeah,
this should
right.
be good. The
Yeah, well,
biblical.
we'll see.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm John. I grew up in the church here. I know Joe for a long time. Okay. And Michael too. Okay. Joe just talks more than Michael. Okay. So thank you for having me again. This is my third time coming. We've kind of done similar talks throughout, and it's kind of a running series. So we're trying to make the talks the same as we go on. I'll summarize what we've talked about so far in our talks and what we're going to be talking about today. So today, the title of the topic today is it's Ancestry.com in the Bible, or Ancestry.com, the biblical edition, and it's all part of the series because Aki, when I sent this to him, made fun of why there is a guy scuba diving at the bottom of the thing. And because the series we're talking about in all the talks, it's called A Deep Dive into the Bible. Okay, we're trying to do a deep dive into understanding the biblical context of what it's written in, and get insight based on understanding the Bible the way it was meant to be read. Okay, so this is part of the whole thing. And the first time we came, we kind of did a little bit of introduction about how the Bible is written and how it's meant to be read. And we said that there are some challenges to our interpretation of the Bible. And basically what we concluded from that talk, we said that the way we read the Bible is not actually the way it was meant to be read. Because the Bible was written, the Old Testament or New Testament was written thousands of years ago for people who were living thousands of years ago. So if you read it as if the way you read the book now, it doesn't make any sense. So it's all about context. And some of the challenges, we said that we live in a different time, we're part of different cultures, and we don't have the same sense of understanding of tradition and the times in which the Bible was written in. And the example we used really is the verse of, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Most people understand that to be Jesus talking about an actual camel going through an actual eye of a needle. And that verse would conclude, if you were to understand it that way, the conclusion would be like rich people can't get to heaven. It's impossible for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. In reality, the eye of a needle is a reference to a door, in a smaller door in the city's gate at the time, at which time a camel had to unload its cargo to enter through the door. So that's, Jesus is saying that rich people must unload their cargo, unload their wealth to enter the kingdom of heaven. Everyone knows this verse, and basically we have to question what we're talking about. So because we don't have gates in our cities, and we don't have big doors and small doors within those gates, we don't know what that door is called an eye of a needle. Okay, so things get lost in translation, and most importantly, the Bible is written with a purpose, and without knowing what the purpose is, we don't understand. Then we don't get the real meaning in it. That was the first talk, and really, what we summarized as well is that the Bible has a narrative. Okay, and like any narrative.
Keep talking.
Okay, so any narrative, any story has a certain set of events. So it's initially there's a bit of a call to action. There's some sort of introduction, and in that introduction there is a process that's going to lead us, to meet people who have a certain purpose or a certain calling, and they have a call to action, and part of that has character development. So we're introduced to characters. Those characters each have their own character arc, and they have a certain call to action. Then there's a rising tension, and that continues to rise until we reach a climax. Then there's something called a denouement after the climax, which is a slow build down towards a resolution. Every story has that. If I told you a story and says the boy went to the zoo, there's no climax, there's no denouement, there's no resolution. So we have to have a complete story. And the Bible is written that way as an entire whole. So when we read the Bible, if we only read like a book of the Bible or a certain passages randomly here and there, we kind of miss the plot line. It's kind of like picking up a book and reading the middle 3 pages. No one reads a book like that. Right? And in the second talk, we talked about this thing called fractals. I don't know if anyone here is like into math or engineering. But fractals are repeated units of themselves. It's a mathematical pattern which a small pattern continues to be repeated over and over and over again into bigger patterns, where the big pattern is the same thing as the small pattern. So this is a figure that represents a fractal, right? You can see that there's a cube. Each cube is made up of smaller cubes, and the smaller cubes have smaller cubes in them. It's a pattern that continues to repeat infinitesimally smaller and smaller and smaller. So that's called a fractal. It's a mathematical equation. And really the Bible is its own fractal. So it has an overall plot line, and each book within that Bible has its own plot line. And the plot line of the smaller books mimics the plot line of the overall Bible. And it's important when we read the Bible, whether it's Genesis or Revelations, whether it's Deuteronomy or it's 2 John, that there is a plot line that's being mimicked throughout the entire Bible, because it's really one single central message that's being delivered. And that central message, the climax of it is in the salvation that's offered through Jesus Christ. Really, the Bible is a story of an old creation to a new creation. There is an old man, and Jesus is the new creation that allows the fulfillment of God's promise to be with God. That's the summary of the whole plot line of the entire Bible. And each book of the Bible builds towards that plot line. So that was our second talk. And then in the second talk, we went on to cover the entire Bible in 30 minutes. So we went through from Genesis to Revelations. We talked about how each book fits into this big plot line. And then when we do it in one big snapshot like that, we can understand how the Bible is just one big plot. And the easiest way to recall it is that in Genesis chapter 3, they refer to after the sin, then there is the enmity of God with man and the serpent. And Revelations, all the way in the last chapter of Revelations, has the same reference to that same passageway as well. So it's really one story, okay? And it's kind of hard to recognize that because there's so many small stories. So it's kind of like, studying for an exam. If you only study one chapter at a time over a long time, you miss the big picture, right? So that leads us to today. So today, this topic about, I wanted to kind of go over the same point that we've been talking about using this idea of the Ancestry.com. I worked with a guy once, one of my colleagues, and this guy, I don't know how he did this, but he told me he was related to every French-Canadian prime minister. He actually, including Justin Trudeau. So I was like, okay. And then he went through his ancestry. I guess he actually showed me how he's related to every single prime minister. This guy is like my 7th cousin once removed. And it was really astonishing because, first of all, I appreciated the fact that he has this sense of history and identity. But really, in understanding where you come from, you understand who you are a lot better. So this guy was able to tell me stories about his family and his upbringing and who he is and the sense of pride, his patriotism as a Canadian, French-Canadian. So we're going to take this notion of what we've been talking about the Bible being one unified central message, and we're going to try and apply it to a very small portion of the Bible that all of us skip because it's kind of difficult to read. And the idea really, I'm not sure this is a good church thing to admit, but I like Game of Thrones, and this is one day I was trying to understand, because it's also confusing, I don't remember what's happening and all this stuff. So one day I came across this diagram here, and I understood what the whole thing is building towards. There's spoilers here if people are watching it or something like that. But I understood what the whole build up, what the whole plot line of the whole, why we spent 8 seasons going through this whole thing. And I could understand it when I saw this family tree of the different houses. So I think there is a value in understanding history, because that obviously gives you a better sense of understanding context. So the key messages of today are threefold. Number one, authors in the Bible are writing with a purpose to a specific audience. So they're not just like writing, they're like writing with a purpose to an audience. And the inspiration of the Holy Spirit in the Bible, in the Gospels, that's where it comes from. It's that it's deliberate. You know, it's not like they just held a pen and the Holy Spirit like wrote with their hands, right? They're writing to someone in mind. The easiest way is the Apostle Paul. His letters are written to an audience. They have like the same way you would write an email to someone. It has a specific goal. That message to the audience is deliberate and specific. It's not random. It's not like I hope they get it. It's very deliberate. And at that time, people reading it would really understand it clearly. And lastly, we need to focus on the details to have a good understanding of the Bible. The plot of the Bible, the meaning of the Bible, and the narrative of our salvation. Okay? So, the Bible, as we said in the last time I talked, is divided into two sections, the Old Testament, the New Testament. And the Old Testament, the way we have it in our Bible, is not the way it was assembled in Hebrew Scriptures. Okay? In Hebrew Scriptures, the order is different. And the order, the Old Testament in Hebrew Scripture is something called Tanakh, which is an abbreviation for three things. The TA stands for Torah. Those are the first 5 books. Those are the books of Moses. The Nak stands for Nevi'im. Nevi'im is like the Arabic word Nebi, which means prophet. So the next category is the books of the prophets. That goes all the way from Joshua to all the way to Jeremiah, Isaiah. And then the last section is called Ketuvim, which is similar to the word Kitab in Arabic, which is the writings or the poetic writings. That's Psalms, Songs of Solomon, Proverbs, okay? And the entire Tanakh, or the entire Old Testament, is building. It's a lot of character development and call to action, building towards
Where would Job be?
Sorry?
Where would Job be?
Job is one of the Ketuvim. It's a prophetic book. It's a poetic book, sorry, because most of it is a poem, basically. He's saying. So the Tanakh, or the Old Testament, is slowly building towards an important message. And a very attentive reader would see it very obviously coming, kind of very obvious. But if it's happening over thousands of years, you can see how you can kind of not be ready for it when it comes. Then this New Testament is divided into the Gospels, the Acts and the letters of the Apostles, and Revelations. And so we're going to just hold off for the Gospels for a second. And so we have the Tanakh, or the Old Testament, which is building up this whole time. And in Acts, one of the first new characters we're introduced to in the Bible, in the book of Acts, is Paul. And at the same time, actually, right before Paul, we're introduced to someone else. Stephen. Yeah. So Stephen, we're introduced to Paul because he's holding the coats for Stephen. So Stephen is a deacon, one of the first deacons of the church, and he's the first martyr of the church. And Acts 7 is Stephen's like soliloquy before he is stoned. Right? Anyone know what that is?
Talks about Moses.
Yeah, he basically goes through the entire Old Testament. It's a full chapter, about 2 pages long, where he starts from Abraham, actually, all the way to Jesus, to prove that Jesus is this climax that the Tanakh has been building towards. So we have the Old Testament slowly giving us a build-up, then the Gospels, which is the climax, and then the first thing in Acts is a summary, a recap of, okay, well, here's everything that we've been talking to you about, and here's how we know that Christ is the fulfillment of that. And in the middle, we're introduced to the central character of the plot line of the Bible in general, okay? That central character is Jesus. And we're first introduced to Jesus in Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. And I have to admit that when I was a kid and my mom would like sit with me and we would like, and my brother, and we would always skip this, okay? Because this is hard to read and kind of useless, right? You would think. So today we're going to indulge with me and we're going to go through the genealogy of Christ, okay? Anyone know how many times the genealogy of Christ is provided in the Bible? Twice. It's provided in the book of Matthew and Luke. It's provided those 2 times. Yeah, Luke and Matthew provide us with genealogy. So we're going to go over the genealogy of Christ because we said it's a meaningful thing to like learn about yourself historically and all that. Okay. So the book of Matthew, this is chapter 1, verse 1. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac, Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot Judah and his brothers. Judah begot Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez begot Hezron, Hezron begot Ram, Ram begot Aminadab, Aminadab begot Naasson, Naasson begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab, Boaz begot Obed by Ruth, Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David, the king. David the king begot Solomon by her who had been the wife of Uriah. Solomon begot Rehoboam, Rehoboam begot Abijah, Abijah begot Asa, Asa begot Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat begot Joram, and Joram begot Uzziah. Uzziah begot Jotham, Jotham begot Ahaz, and Ahaz begot Hezekiah. Hezekiah begot Manasseh, Manasseh begot Amon, and Amon begot Josiah. Josiah begot Jeconiah and his brothers about the time they were carried away to Babylon. And after they were brought to Babylon, Jeconiah begot Shealtiel, and Shealtiel begot Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel begot Abiad, Abiad begot Eliakim, and Eliakim begot Azor, Azor begot Zadok, Zadok begot Achim, Achim begot Eliad, Eliad begot Eleazar, Eleazar begot Mathan, and Mathan begot Jacob, and Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. From David until the captivity in Babylon are 14 generations. Let me just get it cut off here. And from the captivity in Babylon until Jesus are 14 generations.
14 times 3.
So 3 generations of 14. Okay? So that's that's the first introduction to Jesus. We've been building the whole Old Testament, thousands of years building towards one character, and in verse 1 it says right away, this is the genealogy of Jesus Christ, son of David, son of Abraham. Right away, that's the first verse. Okay? So now we're going to go. Okay. Now we're going to go to the genealogy in the book of Luke. Now, in the book of Luke, it's not provided initial. Okay? The genealogy of Christ, or Luke's gospel, does not start with the genealogy of Christ. Okay, it starts with actually introduction, where Luke is writing to a character whose name is Theophilus, and people assume that to be a friend who's called Theophilus. Other people think Theophilus, the word Theophilus is Greek for God's lover, or the lover of God. So he's writing in general to people who love Christ or love God. Okay, so he introduces that. Then the reading that we just had in the compliant prayer is introduced, and Jesus' birth, circumcision, and then we're introduced to Jesus' genealogy. Okay, so the genealogy that Luke provides is the following. It's in chapter 3. Now Jesus himself began his ministry at about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph, the son of Heli, the son of Mathat, the son of Levi, the son of Melchi, the son of Janna, the son of Joseph, the son of Mathathiah, the son of Amos, the son of Nahum, the son of Esli, the son of Nagai, the son of Math, the son of Mathathiah, the son of Semai, the son of Joseph, the son of Judah, the son of Jonas, the son of Ressa, the son of Zerubbabel, the son of Shelthiel, the son of Neri, the son of Melchi, the son of Adai, the son of Kosam, the son of Elomdim, the son of the son of Josi, the son of Eleazar, the son of Joram, the son of Mathat, the son of Levi, the son of Simeon, the son of Judah, the son of Joseph, the son of Jonan, the son of Eliakim, the son of Meliah, the son of Menan, the son of Mathatha, the son of Mathan, the son of David, the son of Jesse, the son of Obed, the son of Boaz, the son of Salmon, the son of Naasson, the son of Aminadab, the son of Ram, the son of Hezron, the son of Perez, the son of Judah, the son of Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, the son of Terah, the son of Nahor, the son of Serug, the son of Ru, the son of Peleg, the son of Eber, the son of Shelah, the son of Canaan, the son of Arphaxad, the son of Shem, the son of Noah, the son of Lamech, the son of Methuselah, the son of Enoch, the son of Jared, the son of Mahalalel, the son of Canaan, the son of Enosh, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. Okay? So that.
Go backwards.
Okay, so that's a good point. So now we read them both. It's obviously difficult to read. I understand how challenging that is. Thank you. So now maybe we can go. Anyone notice any differences? So Joseph already pointed one difference between the genealogy in Matthew in the genealogy in Luke. One difference is that Matthew goes chronologically from beginning to end, and Luke goes anti-chronologically. Luke starts by telling us that Jesus started his ministry at the age of 30. Oh, and by the way, he's the son of Joseph, the son of Heli, and so on and so forth. Any other differences?
It doesn't mention up to Adam, Matthew, but the one in Luke mentions up to
Right.
Adam.
Okay, that's a very important point. So obviously, Matthew's genealogy starts with Abraham, as opposed to Luke's genealogy, which starts with Adam, and that's very deliberate. And anyone know why why they do that? So the Gospels, each Gospel is written for a different audience. Specifically, Matthew's Gospel is written to Jewish people. Okay, so it's very important for someone writing to Jewish people to tell them that this person is the promised Messiah from the line of Abraham, because Abraham is their patriarch. Also in that genealogy of Matthew, he mentions David twice. It says David the king and David the king again. So it's also important because part of the whole Old Testament is the idea that the messianic promise comes through the line of David. Okay? So Matthew is writing to Jewish people. So he wants to show Jewish people that this guy is for you. Luke is writing to Greek people, or more specifically to Gentiles. Okay? Because he's writing to Gentiles, he needs to show non-Jewish people that this guy is not just for Jewish people, he's for everyone. So he needs to go way back to the very first person, Adam, or the old man, right? To show that this Jesus is the descendant of Adam, God's creation. He's for all human beings. It's very different. And that's why Luke goes further back. Any other differences?
Some differences in the names.
Yeah, actually, there are different genealogies. So let's take a look here.
Cool.
We have an issue here. Because, as we said, one genealogy is chronologic, one is anti-chronologic. One starts with Abraham, the other extends all the way to Adam and to God. One includes women in the names, and one does not at all. And that's traditionally at the time, the way any genealogy would be strictly paternal. They did not include women in the line, right? It didn't matter who the mom was, it was all paternal lines. But Matthew, for some reason, includes women. Matthew's genealogy has 41 generations. Luke's genealogy has 77 generations. So, that's odd. But most importantly, they're actually different genealogies. And that's an issue, because if we're saying that the entire plot line of the gospel stems and builds up towards one climactic figure who is the means of our salvation, how can we believe any of that when the genealogies are not even the same in the book that we read?
I think a reason could be that because he is a king and a priest.
Okay, but this doesn't matter. These are children. It doesn't matter if you're a priest or a king. Your father is your father.
No, but I'm saying because he's a king and priest, there's two groups of family coming from Jesus.
Maybe, but that's not the answer.
Okay.
It's a good guess, though.
Mary, and one is the genealogy of Joseph.
So that's a common point that people say, well, okay, yeah. The reason is Matthew is giving us Joseph's line, and Luke is giving us Mary's line. That's a common argument that's made, but that's not accurate, actually. It's not that. Because if Luke was giving us Mary's line, her name would be in there.
Another way.
Oh, you said that Mary's line? But that's not actually, because Matthew is specifically giving us Joseph's line. I'll show you why in a second. Yeah. It's a good point. That's commonly said, that because Jesus is not really the son of Joseph, one is giving us that one, and then the other one's giving us Mary's line. But even if, why would one have different numbers of generations?
Maybe Matthew's is like a high-level overview of what's happening, and Luke is more specific.
Yeah, in terms of the generational numbers, that is true, because Matthew is giving us a dynastic genealogy. So he's specifically skipping some characters. He's highlighting certain figures that the reader would understand to be important or meaningful figures that would automatically clue in to be like, oh yeah, well David, yeah, and then Joachim, yeah. That is one answer why the generations, but that doesn't answer why the names are different. In fact, let me show you something specific here. they're so different that they don't even agree on the grandfather of Jesus. In Matthew, Jesus' grandfather is Jacob. In Luke, Jesus' grandfather is Eli. In fact, from David on, the names are drastically different. You can see that when you look at, in addition to the fact that Luke has more names, and Luke generally in his writing is much more specific. In addition to the fact that Luke has more names, there are actually also different names. So if we read the Bible with attention and detail and focus, and look at it a little bit with a sense of purpose as a reader, trying to analyze something, this is something we got to pick up right away. And it's a problem, because Jesus' identity is a fulfillment of the prophecy of the Old Testament. So how can he have two different bloodlines? It would be different if one of these gospels was not like a canonized gospel. It's in our Bible. They're one book over from the other.
Could it be because he's fully divine and fully human?
True, but this is only the human line.
Okay. Just curious, that's all.
No, it's good guesses. So, when we put them side by side, you see that obviously Matthew's genealogy is the one in the dark letters, and Luke's is the one in the shaded gray letters. Matthew's genealogy is much shorter, but it's also not temporal. Like the numbers don't match, the generations don't match in time. There's so much time that elapses from between one 14 generation and so much less than another 14 generations. So he's specifically picking certain generations that are important to prove a point. That's called a dynastic genealogy. As opposed to Luke, who's basically being very detailed. He's trying to go this. Okay? But there's really a lot of discrepancies the closer you get to Jesus. You would at least think that it would be more divergent the further, it's pretty easy for me to tell what the name of my grandfather was. There's less controversy around that. My great-great-great-grandfather, honestly, I don't know his name. You know what I mean? So it's hard to imagine why it would be similar at the top and very different to the fact that we can't agree on Jesus' grandfather. That's a problem. And that's to do with the message. It's not like Luke who likes the name Eli because he's speaking to Gentiles. There's a problem here. And that problem comes because we don't understand how genealogies worked and what marital customs and rights existed in Jewish culture at the time. So let me show you. In the book of... Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Just another comment, how did they even track this? Did they write down the names every generation or something?
Yeah, most of these are kind of cultural. It has a lot to do also, the paternal lines were very important from an inheritance standpoint. So most people knew their descendants and all that stuff. But it's mostly verbal. It's not necessarily written in concrete stone. But you can agree that, we believe in our Bible and the fidelity of our Bible and the consistency of the gospel in the Bible. We shouldn't have this inconsistency. And the reason is it's not inconsistent. It's actually correct. Both are correct. So, in Matthew it says Jacob begot Joseph. And in Luke it says Joseph is the son of Heli. So, this introduces us to a concept called levitral marriage in Jewish culture. Okay? This is well known in Jewish custom at the time. And it stems from a verse in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 5 and 6. It says, "If brothers dwell together, and one of them dies, and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go in to take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel." So it's a way to keep the name of a dead person progressively. So for example, person A and person B are both married, and they're brothers. Person A dies and has no children. Person B, his brother, is going to father a child with person A's wife. That child is biologically the son of person B. But in law, the son carries the name of person A. And that's why there's different names. So, when you look at it, that makes sense, because what the conclusion from that verse is that Heli and Jacob, the grandfathers, right, are brothers. One of them died without having children, and the other one fathered the child with his sister-in-law, as would be Jewish custom. So Jacob begot Joseph because Heli died before he could have a son. So Joseph is Heli's son. No, he's Heli's.
Heli had no son.
Correct.
So Joseph.
Is his legal. In law is his son,
Yeah.
but biologically he is Jacob's son.
So,
Is
John,
this a different Joseph than one of the 12 tribes?
This is Joseph, Jesus' father.
Oh.
Joseph Mary. Yeah.
so Jacob begot Joseph. That's from Matthew.
Yes.
So you're telling me that the what was the marriage called? The one where the
Levitical marriage.
Levitical marriage. That's a Jewish custom.
Yes.
And Matthew followed more of a Jewish angle.
Correct.
So then, how come Matthew didn't go with the Joseph, the son of Heli?
Why didn't he stick with that?
Yeah. Why didn't he do what Luke did?
We'll see why in a second. That's going to come up. That's a good point. Okay, that's a very good point. But I think another important question is, what I just told you doesn't make sense. Because I told you that Jacob and Heli are brothers, but they have different fathers in the genealogies. They should have the same grandfather then. You see what I'm saying?
Can you draw it out?
This is it here. So, we agreed that basically Joseph is the legal son of one and the biologic son of another.
Yeah.
That means that those two are brothers.
Yeah.
That means that Jacob and Heli are brothers. If they are brothers, they should have the same father. But they don't. They have different names of their fathers.
Same thing.
Well, no, it wouldn't be the same thing. It's a different concept now because, like I told you in Deuteronomy, only if a person died and had no children with his wife, then the wife could marry the brother. That was obliged. She had to stay in the family. But if a man died and already had a son, that would be the biologic son of that man who died. And the wife could marry another man, and he would have another son with that wife. And that's what you're drawing here.
That makes it confusing.
It is a little confusing, but
Can you repeat that one more time?
so basically, so we understand the Jacob-Heli thing.
Yeah. No, just the same thing you just said. I missed something.
So if a man had a child with a woman and then
Yes.
died,
Yes.
that woman is free to marry anyone now. She doesn't have to stay inside the family.
Okay.
So she can marry another man and have another son
With a different name.
with a different father and therefore a different name. A different legal and biological name. But the mother would be the same. So they would still be brothers. So that's what it is. So Jacob and Heli are brothers through the mother, but have different fathers. And that's what this is here. So you can see that accordingly. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Jacob and Heli have brothers.
Yes.
Which one is the father of Joseph?
The biologic father is Jacob.
And Heli?
He died before he could have a kid. He is the father. He's the lawful father, according to custom, by name. So Luke is being specific. Just to answer your question, he's a specific author. He's going according to the law and tradition. Okay? But you can see that because of that one little incident, they actually end up, it tracks up so much as is amplified, that one genealogy is in Solomon's line, one genealogy is in Nathan's line. Okay? So really, Jacob and Heli are brothers. They have the same mother. Her name is Esther. But they have different fathers. And that's why the genealogies of Jesus, this little nuance here, is why the genealogy of Christ is different in Matthew and Luke. Complicated but interesting, right? Now, this is something, there's a very famous Hebrew scholar in the 4th century who's a Hebrew historian. His name is Eusebius. That's his conclusion based on history, is that the reality is that there is actually one Jesus, and it's the same Jesus with the same people in his life. He is the descendant of the same people. It just depends on whether you use law or you use biology to justify someone's genealogy. Now, the question you're asking is a good question. Why wouldn't Matthew stick with the lawful names? Why would he give us that? This is the same thing I just drew for you. So, same idea, exactly. Just you don't need to worry about this. Well, it's not even moving.
Give it a second.
The lag time here. Yeah, so this is the same idea. So under Jewish law, Joseph is the son of Heli, but under real life, he is the biologic son. Now, one question you might ask is, why do they have this weird incestuous rule? Like, they just love having their names, like they're so enamored with their name that they need to spread it like that. This has serious implications because of the way the rite of passage is given. So the eldest son held a lot more claim to the family's inheritance than the younger son. So if the elder son died, his wife needs that claim through her son. So it's very important historically to have that. And that's going to tie into something we're going to talk about in just one second. Because right now we're going to start talking a little bit more in focus about Matthew's genealogy. Because like I told you, Matthew's genealogy, unlike Luke's is a list of 77 names. But Matthew's is like, every once in a while, first of all, he's picking names whenever kind of he chooses. It's this dynastic generational line. And every once in a while, he includes a little bit of something that is not part of someone's names in the genealogy. For example, he says these couple of things. Judah and his brothers, and he also refers to this person called Jeconiah and his brothers. What? His brothers are not part of the genealogy. Why are you adding that in there? So a reader at the time, a Jewish person reading this at the time, would think to themselves, okay, he's obviously trying to tell me that Jesus comes from Judah. The reason why his brothers are added there is a reminder. You know, who are Judah's brothers?
Oh, Reuben, Benjamin, Joseph.
Yeah, the other 11 tribes of Israel. Judah is the eldest of those and was always had this kind of like kingship associated with him. So Matthew, by including Judah and adding the words his brothers, is reminding the reader that Jesus comes from this tribe which has always been known as a royal tribe of Israel. That's one thing. Jeconiah is an interesting reference, okay? And that's why your question, why? Because Jeconiah, by having Jacob begot Joseph, you have to go through this line of Jeconiah. Jeconiah is a king of Israel, a king of Judah, which was North Israel at the time. And he was the king of Judah when the Babylonians took over Israel and exiled people. Okay? Now, an astute reader would remember that in Jeremiah 22, there is a curse on Jeconiah. In fact, here's what it says. As I live, says the Lord, though Konya is another name for Jeconiah. So, though Konya, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were the signet on my ring, on my right hand, yet I would pluck you off, and I will give you into the hand of those who seek your life, and into the hand of those whose face you fear, the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and the hand of Chaldeans. So I will cast you out, and your mother who bore you, into another country where you were not born, and there you shall die. But to the land to which they desire to return, there they shall not return. And this is well known, this little passage I'm going to read right now. It's called the curse of Jeconiah. He goes, is this man, Jeconiah, a despised, broken idol, a vessel in which is no pleasure? Why are they cast out, he and his descendants, and cast into a land which they do not know? O earth, 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 hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, Write this man down as childless, a man who shall not prosper in his days, for none of his descendants shall prosper, sitting on the throne of David and ruling anymore in Judah. The curse of Jeconiah is basically Jeremiah is cursing Jeconiah, telling him, your children will never be kings. And actually it says you will be childless. So if there's a curse on Jeconiah saying that he will never be the king, so how can Jesus come from Jeconiah? No, this is a true line. Well, it's a bit nuanced, right? Because who's actually the descendant of Jeconiah's line? Is it Jesus? That's what your comment comes in about Mary and Joseph. So is Jesus like the son of Joseph biologically? No, he's not. He is by law the son of Moses because Joseph was the son of Joseph because Joseph was Mary's husband. But he's not biologically. So the reader would remember that there's a curse on Jeconiah. And that is further proof that Jesus is not the biologic son of Joseph and is it's a result of the Holy Spirit and Saint Mary, the ever Virgin Mary. So that's a clear, deliberate line there. That's why he's sticking with that line. So the reader at the time would be triggered. Judah and his brothers, oh yeah, so this is a guy from the line of Judah, obviously, so he's the Messiah. And he's from Jeconiah, so Jeconiah was supposed to have a curse. So it's a double meaning. It's a reminder that he's not really biologically from the line of Jeconiah, but also it's a reminder that Jesus undoes the curse on Jeconiah. Now let's get into a little bit something more interesting in the book of Matthew here. Because the next interesting thing in the genealogy of Matthew is the mention, still just a little lag here, it's like when you're on internet and you have to like use the phone modem. It'll come, I think. But there's a mention of 5 women in Matthew's genealogy, which is also interesting because we said that Jewish culture would not include women. So why is he including these women specifically?
Were these women maybe saved for faith to God?
It's a great point. But I'm going to tell you who the women are. Hopefully this thing kicks in soon. But the women are the following: Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, the wife of Uriah, who he doesn't say her name. I'll tell you why in a second. Thank you. Oh, you got it?
it's working.
I think the reason why he
Just
doesn't
need your
say
touch.
the name of the wife because he committed
Yeah,
adultery
it's
with
good.
that woman.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay. So we have Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, the wife of Uriah, and Mary. Those are the 5 women who are mentioned in the genealogy. And that's really, really deliberate because I'm going to tell you something about each of these women. Tamar is the daughter-in-law of Judah. Her husband died without them having children. So what was the next thing to do?
The husband will marry
The brother would marry her, right? But the brother didn't want to share the inheritance. So he specifically did not have children with her. He used like contraceptive methods, like at the time, I guess, but to like not have children with her. And so was cursed for that and died early. So Judah told her, don't worry, I'll marry you to the younger son when he gets older. But he felt Judah, the main, like the royal Judah from the tribe of Israel, thought that that Tamar was cursed. So he didn't want to marry his son to her. That's a problem because she's not allowed to get married and she has no means of sustaining herself in that culture at that time. So she's stuck. So Judah's wife dies and he decides to go on a trip for his cattle, sheep, or whatever. Okay? So she realizes this and she goes to meet him along the way and she dresses up like a prostitute. And she seduces him and he hires her for her services to have sex with his daughter-in-law. And he can't tell because she's wearing a veil. And they make an agreement. She tells him, give me this and this and this, a seal and a tie, just so I can remember. 3 months later, I think I know how to do it. Did you go youth lounge again?
The adapter in my car.
3 months later, guess who's pregnant now? Tamar. And guess who the father is?
Judah?
Her father-in-law is the father. So his children are his grandkids and his kids. So they accuse her of prostitution. They tell her, you're a prostitute. So they want to stone her. So she goes and tells Judah, the person who gave me these things is the father. And he recognizes immediately that he is the father, and therefore she's not punished because of that. That's the first woman. So the first woman acted like a prostitute to maintain the birthright. The second woman is a prostitute. Rahab is not an Israeli, is not Jewish. She was living in the wall of Jericho, and she owned an inn. And at that time, having an inn and having a brothel were a little bit of like a slippery slope. They're very similar. Rahab's story is that she helps the 2 spies that Joshua sends out, because she hides them so that they can do their spy mission and destroy Jericho and the Canaanites inside. And they promise, she tells, I'll help you because I believe that your God is the God. So she's a woman of faith. She asked them to promise to save her family. And they ask her to give him a signal, so she has to hang a red scarlet scarf outside her window. And people theorize that that's where the red light district idea comes from in Holland. Okay? And she is saved. In fact, she's Jesus' great-grandma. That's the second woman. The third woman is Ruth. Ruth, everyone knows Ruth. Ruth has got the nice short book in the Bible, 4 stories. She married Boaz. Ruth, was she Jewish?
No, she was a Moabite.
She was a Moabite. Anyone know where the Moabites come from?
I think.
What?
Huh?
What?
No. The Moabites are a descendant of Lot. Anyone? Lot is Abraham's brother.
Yes.
Anyone know how? Because, when Lot had to escape,
His 2 daughters.
perfect, it's incest. His 2 daughters got him drunk and had children with him. And one of the children is named Moab.
What?
That's the third woman. The fourth woman is not mentioned by name for a reason, because if you would have just written her name is? What's her name? Uriah's wife. Bathsheba. If you would have written Bathsheba, maybe the reader would have forgotten or got confused or didn't recognize. He specifically is writing Uriah's wife because that is a person who engaged in adultery. David specifically killed her husband so that he can have her basically after he saw her bathing. That's the fourth woman. And the fifth woman is an ever virgin who had a child. So the reader here is going to recognize some important points. Number one, most of these women were not Jewish, except for Saint Mary. And Tamar, I guess that was early on. So you recognize that Jesus is for the Jews, but has always included others in his genealogy. Secondly, Jesus is not meant to be royalty the way we perceive royalty, because he comes from a line of scandal. Right? There's a lot of scandal. It's like a soap opera. So that is an important message to the reader, to recognize that this Jesus is both not a king in the earthly sense, but more importantly, he is someone who makes things perfect that are not perfect in and of themselves. And that's a very, intricate, deliberate message in a genealogy, and this is something we skip over. When I read it to you, we didn't notice all this attention in detail. Right? So, Matthew is specifically mentioning these 5 women for a reason. He wants the reader to recognize that these are 5 really meaningful characters with complex stories. Now, why does Matthew say 14, 14, 14? Because we agree that that's not really the number. It's a dynastic. He's just highlighting certain characters. Why 14, 14, 14? This comes from a concept of something called gematria. Gematria is giving a letter of the alphabet a number. So A would be 1, B would be 2, C would be 3. In Hebrew, D is 4, and this letter here, the I, is 6. Okay? So if you were to want to write 14 together, you would kind of put 4 plus 4 plus 6 is 14. And those three is how you write David in Hebrew. So the reader in Matthew, who would obviously know this very easily and be able to recognize numbers and letters at the time in Hebrew, would quickly recognize that what Matthew's trying to tell us is that Jesus is the descendant of the promised messianic prophet, the promised Messiah through the line of David, and David. 3 times he's mentioned David. Okay, and that's also very deliberate. It's not. And then I like the idea of hypothesizing, but we're not here to make up things about reading the Bible, right? It's the 7 and all this stuff. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. But 464 is not the only combination.
Absolutely. But the reader is going to know that the reason why 14 is a memory of David, basically. The reader, because that's how they would add for those numbers. So you're right. It's not the only way to have 14. Absolutely.
Okay, so you just wrote 14 that way.
Exactly. You wrote that because if you were to write the word, it would write that way to be like David. Exactly. And there's many. We can always come up with reasons why things are things like, oh, it's Mary, but it's not. It's very deliberate. It's very specific. The same way, if you were to read a book, it's written specifically. You have to read it specifically. So, in conclusion, today we went over, Jesus' genealogy, and it's a dry topic, and it's not an easy thing to read, and obviously something we all skip. Has anyone been in church once where they read the genealogy of Christ? Never. They don't even read it in church. Right? But it's important because right when we're done with the Old Testament, which has been this build-up to the climax, and right before we start getting the denouement, which starts with St. Stephen, the first introduction we get into this climactic character of Jesus is this genealogy. So and you know what they say, first impressions last a lifetime, right? So the first impression you're going to get of Jesus is this genealogy. There's a lot to glean out of that. Okay? That's one thing. Secondly, I think an important message from today is that different authors are writing for different audiences with different purposes. So when you read a book, you got to read it the way the author is writing. So Matthew is writing to Jews. Mark is actually writing to Romans. And that's why he focuses a lot on suffering, because at the time Romans were persecuting Christians. Luke is writing to Gentiles, specifically Hebrews, because Luke was specifically Greeks, because Luke was following St. Paul. That's why he writes Acts as well. And John is writing kind of a generic worldly character, because John is very kind of a little, the word meta? A little bit meta for everyone. So today, just by looking at the genealogy, a small little component of Jesus, we went through literally a list of names. But that list of names is written in such a beautiful, deliberate, specific, meaningful way, we were able to conclude the following things. 1, Jesus is the completion of the promise made to Abraham and the people of Israel. 2, he is the fulfillment of the Tanakh. Passed out. It's perfect timing. Oh, it's easy. I should know that. 3, the reader is quickly reminded at the onset of the New Testament that Jesus is the climax of the Old Testament. First, right away, you flip the page, and right away the next page is telling you this is the summary. Christ came for all and is not the result of a human royal line. That's how we got the whole Joachim, Jeconiah thing. He's not royalty. He's not like Prince William and Prince George and all He is the result. He is the fulfillment of the promise through the line of David, who makes things perfect that are not perfect. There's a nice verse in 2 Corinthians written by St. Paul. St. Paul is basically, he's doing all these miracles, he's a well-known character, and he has like a skin disease. And he prays all the time for the skin disease to go away, and it's basically not. Like he is doing all these miracles, but he can't help himself, basically. And he concludes in it, he says that God's strength is made perfect in weakness. And that's the summary of the genealogy. All these characters, some of them are scandalous, difficult stories. God's strength is made perfect in weakness. And lastly, Jesus is the salvation for all, Jews or Gentiles. Okay? And that is perfectly within the plot line that we started the talk with. The whole plot line of the entire arc of the gospel. It's one perfect summary. Even if you were to break it down to a list of 44 names, you can see how that fractal, that plot line exists there as well. I think that's it. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Why do we have to go back all the way to when he was cursed to prove that Jesus is not the biological son? Why not just stop at Joseph because he's truly not the biological son of Joseph? Why do we all just to prove that he's the son of God?
Oh, I see. Well, because there is meaning in all these other characters. All the other characters, like Tamar and all these people, we get meaning from that. And then there is another message to it as well, which is that Jesus is undoing the curse of Jeconiah. Right? That Jesus is the one who can break the curse as well. So I think, it's not like Matthew is like, I'm going to ignore this and just put Jeconiah to prove a point, but it's basically, he wants to show that there is a lineage to Jesus which stems back to Abraham and David, and you have to go get there somehow. And he chose that route to make that point consistently, right?
So physically, did he have children, but they were just not acknowledged?
Correct. He had physical children, yes. In fact, one of them is Beelzebub, who becomes a very noble king and well recognized. But he spends 30-something years in exile in prison in Babylon. And he never returns back home. I think the exile lasts in Babylon many years. So what they did another reason why they mentioned Jeconiah is he's seen a little bit of like a tragic hero. Because when the Babylonian people conquered Judah, so Israel, as we know it now, is not the way it was then. There were really two separate Israel and Judah. And Judah was the bigger one. It consisted of 10 tribes, and the Babylonians conquered Judah, and they didn't take everyone to Babylon. What their idea was is they were going to take the elite, society's elite and the king, and move them to Babylon and assimilate them within the Babylonian culture. And obviously the most elite in society was the king. So there is a part of it that sees Jeconiah as a sacrificial character who, for his people's sake, is suffering, and that some people, the readers at the time who recognized that, would identify with Jesus being a sacrificial lamb, the sacrificial king. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thanks guys.